Thank you very much. My name is Colin Gibbons. I'm a product manager at Splunk, now Cisco. I'm assuming if you're sitting here, you're a Splunk customer? Yes? 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 Yes. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, so one of the things that I've multiple responsibilities at Splunk, but over the past few years, the main thing that I've been working on is the integration between Splunk and Amazon services. This could be either from the add-on that he's shaking his head. Everybody's probably familiar with add-ons if you're a Splunk customer. So you know that we have add-ons that are able to pull data from third-party products into Splunk. And then the other integration that I've been working on is kind of what I'm going to be talking about. So on top of working on all the AWS integrations, a year ago when Cisco acquired us, they were like, oh my God, you did such a great job doing all the integration work with AWS. Now we want you to go and figure out how to integrate all the Cisco products into Splunk. So I've been spending the last year basically working across Cisco on trying to build integrations with all those products. There's nothing I'm really going to be talking about that should be under NDA or roadmap items, but in case there is, basically just take note that anything that I say that's a roadmap item is always subject to change. Your customers, you know that. Anytime a vendor tells you something's going to come out, it's probably not. So yes, the nature of software. So one of the things that we know is that, and again, I work in the cybersecurity group, and we know that security products generate a lot of data, and we know that Splunk can be fairly expensive. Yes, yes. And so we know that a lot of times customers don't want to store all that data in Splunk because of the cost, whether it's ingest costs for on-prem or SVC costs for cloud. But the key thing is that for security use cases or even network use cases, you still want to have access to that data when you need it for like investigations, threat hunting, or whatever. And so, when we've been working with AWS over the course of the past few years on, swim lanes of what is Splunk used for, what is the S3 bucket used for, or security lake, you use Splunk for a reason. You can ingest any data you want to in Splunk. You can query the data at, if the data's indexed, if the data's mapped to the common information model and accelerate it, you get timely responses to that data. If I'm using enterprise security and I'm running content and detections against that data for threat detection for security use cases, that's basically the key thing with Splunk. Being able to run searches, run detections against that data in real time. When you start talking about data lakes, like S3 buckets, which you're probably all storing data in S3 and or security lake, that comes at, you're not really, it's a data lake, it's a data storage. You're not really running, real-time detections and against that data. So when we started partnering with AWS, on this, that was kind of like what we started thinking about. We're like, okay, well, customers might be storing their VPC flow logs, WAF logs, and all this information in Security Lake. They're not storing it in Splunk, but they still want to be able to run detections against the data. They still want to be able to search that data for threat hunting, forensic use cases. And so that's really where Splunk comes into play. Depending on whether or not you are a Splunk on-prem customer or a Splunk Cloud customer, as you know, for Splunk Cloud, a lot of our customers store data for 90 days. On-prem, some customers build out infrastructures to store data for a lot longer periods of time for compliance use cases. Last week when I was at Cisco Live, a lot of customers I was talking to in the financial and regulated industries were storing a massive amount of Cisco firewall router switch data, in their on-prem Splunk, but they were trying to store high fidelity, low volume data in Splunk Cloud. Well, the good thing about Amazon Security Lake is you're able to basically use Security Lake or an S3 bucket. I mean, it's basically S3 under the covers to basically store data for longer periods of time for compliance. But now if you need to go back and you need to use that data for any sort of like forensic use cases or searching, that's kind of where the integration comes into play. I'm sure everybody here knows Security Lake, so I'm not really going to spend basically any time on this slide of what data you can store in Security Lake. AWS services information, as well as third-party log information. So the key thing here, the only thing I'll talk about this is no matter whether or not you switch from sending your data from an S3 bucket into Security Lake, the key thing is no matter what data sources you store in Security Lake, there's two big differences. S3 bucket, as you know, you can store anything in an S3 bucket. SV, CSV files, XML, JSON, whatever you want to store. The data is not schematized, the data is not normalized, it's whatever. In Security Lake, the key thing is that the data is stored in Parquet and the data is normalized to OCSF. Why does this matter? Is now if I'm going in and I'm using Athena or I'm doing a federated search against the data, now if I say, hey, go look at VPC flow log source IP, well, because the data is schematized to OCSF and is stored in Parquet, it knows where to go look. It knows like, oh, here's the column for source IP. Versus if the data is stored in S3, I got to dig through CSV files, XML files, and all that. So we were looking at customers were coming to us and saying, hey, we got all this data stored there, and again, we want to get more visibility into that data that we're not sending into Splunk, and or, I'll say it, even though I work for Splunk, we're trying to reduce cost. We don't want to send all that data in Splunk. We want to reduce cost, and it was kind of interesting. One of the things that came up last week when I was at Cisco Live with a couple customers. One customer specifically, won't name the name, but on one side of the table, I had the NetOps team. On the other side of the table, I had the security ops team. And security was who was paying for Splunk, but the network team was sending all their log data. You know where this is going. and the security team's like, yeah, you're driving up my costs. You're driving up my costs with all this router switch data, and stuff like that. So, we start talking about, well, there's, hey, if send it to S3, send it to Security Lake if you can, and then we can basically come in here and still gain visibility. So, we've had the TA for a while. We're always constantly making updates to the TA. And look, I do have some customers, and this is what I always say. What is the use case? What latency are you willing to deal with the data to sponsor that use case? Some of my customers, they're pulling the CloudTrail data into Splunk, where they're running frequent detections against that data. They don't want to deal with any latencies, because if there's any changes in their AWS environment, or there's outages or anything that they need to do troubleshooting, they need to be more proactive, and they need to know about that immediately. Not store the data in S3 or Security Lake, then let me use federated search to basically figure out whether or not there's a latency, an outage, or things like that. So what I would say is when you're wrapping your mind around, should I use federated search? Should I use ingested data in Splunk? Just kind of think through the use case. Last November, we announced federated analytics, which basically allows you, if you're a Security Lake customer, and I'll talk about S3. So if you're an S3 customer, we also offer federated search for S3. This gives you the ability from within Splunk to be able to search data in S3, just like if the data was in Splunk. For Security Lake, we introduced this component called federated index. There's two pieces to it. There is what we call federated search and data lake index. So when you think about the regular way of data coming into Splunk through add-ons or through edge processor or through anything like that, the data gets stored in a regular S3 bucket. in Splunk index. Now we do have methods to basically then take that data and move it off to an S3 bucket if you want to migrate that data. Now, as data is coming in now into Amazon Security Lake, what we call the data lake index piece will listen to subscribers. You set up subscribers in Security Lake, VPC flow log, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, whatever data you want is coming into Security Lake, you can set up these subscribers. Through Data Lake Index, what this will do is this listens to that on that subscriber. CloudTrail, OCSF event class, OCSF category. You can go over there and you can define. So now as that CloudTrail data is coming into Security Lake and we're listening on that subscriber, we will pull that data back into Splunk and store that data in a temporary index that is basically time-bound to 30 days. And after 30 days, that data will start aging out. How is it priced? It is priced just like, it's priced by SVC. So it's priced based on your current, if you're a cloud-based customer, it's priced based on SVCs. And so, but it is actually it comes out to be a lower cost than if you're ingesting the data through the normal channel, because we're indexing the data. The data lake index is pulling the data directly into the index, as opposed to going through the search head. And then also it is stored in tstat files, which is basically there's a summary index. And so the data is faster to query. It's a lot better compressed. It is stored in OCSF. And so the data in that temporary index is all normalized and schematized to OCSF. Now, from within Splunk, you're able to query that data. You're able to basically search that data, just like that data is in Splunk. I mean, technically it is in Splunk. We are pulling it back into a summary index, and it looks just like any other normal index. That's capability number one. Capability number two is what we call federated search. Federated search allows you to search the data in Security Lake just like the data is in Splunk. Now, this is based on Athena. So behind the scenes, we are using Athena to initiate those searches, and that is based on the same type of Athena cost that you normally would incur by basically a data scan unit, a DSU cost. But we do put guardrails behind it, so some analysts could not come in there and basically write some crazy query to basically drive up your DSU calls. We will look at that query. We will not let that query execute if that query is going to basically drive up a cost hit. And so if you're looking at federated search, then basically you can buy what we call DSU packs from Splunk. So you could buy like, hey, I want to buy 5 DSUs, I want to buy 10 DSUs, whatever. You can basically buy these packs. The data lake index piece, like I said, is more based on SVC pricing. So that you can basically contact your Splunk sales rep and basically use that index piece, and it's not going to impact. You're not going to have to pay for anything else. So, for example, some of my customers were rolling off certain logs out of Splunk into Security Lake. Well, so they're not ingesting it in Splunk, so they're not paying for the SVC in Splunk. So they're just rolling it off into Security Lake and pulling it back in. And again, there's still an SVC hit, but the hit is not as bad. The use cases here is twofold. So when we think about federated search and we think about the ability of searching the data in Security Lake or searching the data or pulling the data, threat hunting. So when we think about security threat hunting use cases, hey, I want to go search for this IOC, I want to go search for this observable, I want to go search for this information in Security Lake. That is kind of more of the ad hoc, threat investigation use case. When you are wanting to pull data back into Splunk, where you're wanting to run a bunch of frequent detections using enterprise security, or even if you're just scheduling searches against the data, that's more of a threat detection. So that's where I would say, hey, if it's going to be frequent detections that you're running, that's the data lake index piece. If it's ad hoc querying and you just want to query the data, that's more of the kind of federated search search use case. Now, as I mentioned, the data that comes back into Splunk through the data lake index is mapped and normalized to OCSF. So that means any of your out-of-the-box detections that you've got today that's written based on the add-on of data that you're pulling in from like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, if you have detections and SPL queries written, that's going to be based on the AWS raw data that you're pulling into Splunk. So any of your content that you've got that is written for OCS, for the raw data or for SIM, will just have to be updated to basically work with the new new OCSF schema. If you're an enterprise security customer, or even if you're not, you can go to our detection, our threat detection site, and we have a bunch of out-of-the-box. We've got up to 40 detections now that are written against the CloudTrail data. Now, another component that we've been working on that you might be familiar with, might not, is called Edge Processor or Data Manager. Data Manager is a tool. It's a data pipeline management tool that allows you to route data into Splunk or into S3, and Security Lake is on the roadmap for this. So basically, bottom line is you can use, just like if you're familiar with how you're sending data into Splunk today through heavyweight forwarders or through syslog or through HEC or anything like that, universal forwarders, you can send all that data into ingest processor or edge processor, but the key thing is now through ingest processor and edge processor, you're able to do routing, filtering, transforms, and all that stuff through edge processor. So that way you can then say, hey, this particular data, I want to route it to Splunk. This data, I want to route it to an S3 bucket or to another data source. And so one other thing that we've got coming out that I'm actually actively looking for preview customers. So this is something that we're going to be launching in the October timeframe, but I'm looking for customers. So if anybody's interested, come talk to me. We have a new feature coming out that we call S3 Replay. So what S3 Replay will do is that will, if you've got data stored in Splunk, so we have federated search for S3 that allows you to search data in S3, but S3 Replay allows you to replay data from your S3 bucket back into a Splunk index. So, I mean, you could create a Splunk index that's time-bound, and you could say, hey, I'm doing this investigation, I want to go grab the data out of my S3 bucket to pull it back into this temporary index where I can run a bunch of detections against it or search it. Or like, for example, a couple customers that I have spoken to wanted to use it for audit reasons. An auditor comes in and says, hey, prove to us that you have the data stored for whatever, this particular workload or infrastructure or whatever, and it's stored in S3. Now they can replay that information back into Splunk, and then basically you can run your dashboards and reports and queries against that. So that is something that we are looking at launching, like I said, in the October timeframe. So if anybody, we're starting preview, and in the next week, anybody who's interested in being preview would love to sign you up and all that stuff. And I think that I am almost out of time. So I've got 50 seconds left, but what I'll do is, again, if you're interested in S3 Replay, I'll just walk off to the side, give me your information, and then I will contact you. Preview works very simple. We can either deploy it on your production stack. All we gotta do is basically turn it on in your production stack. So let me caveat, this is for Splunk Cloud customers only for the first preview. Then we will look at supporting what we call BYOL or CMP customers at a later time. So basically, cloud customers only at first. Or we can basically spin up a new stack for you, a test stack, for you to test out the feature if you don't want us to deploy it on your production stack. And with that said, I'm at 0 seconds.